everyone, welcome to Signals. I'm your host, Gwen Chen. Here's the truth. Everyone has data, but only winners have signals. Every episode, I sit down with leaders to discuss how to turn data into signals, signals into actions, and actions into real growth. Marketing, GTM, and growth. If you want to know what's working, you are in the right place. Hey, Ramya, good to see you again. Welcome to Signals.
Good to see you, Gwen. Excited to be here.
I know you've led a lot of influential developer-focused products at AWS, and now you're leading the search and AI at Elastic. What made you make a decision? And then what's special about Elastic?
Yeah, thank you so much, Gwen. I'm super excited about my new job. Um, when I look at any opportunity as a product marketer, I look at perhaps three things and three main things. Number one is technology. And I'm a technologist at heart. I'm a computer science engineer at heart. And so I always think if I were in that space, would I use the technology? Number two is what specifically I'll be influencing. And number three, this may sound cliched, but I look at the people building the product and the company. Are they passionate? Are their values convergent with what I look for in a job in an organization? And I think specifically focusing on number one and number two, right? Obviously number three checked for me, but number one and number two. With the advent of LLMs, we're all speaking about generative AI. We're all speaking about how we can use machines to do our work. What becomes important and how these LLMs and how the generative AI applications become relevant for us is that they understand our context, our specificity. For example, let's say, you want to go, everything actually from booking a ride to searching for your favorite outfit or even getting matched with a potential partner, right? Everything is based on search. And we all use search more than we think we do. We all use Elastic more than we think we do. And for me, I think the power of being able to marry that engine, which is data analytics and search, with the power of LLMs to drive context and relevance to what customers are looking for is super exciting. Specifically, my role is in this space. I lead our search, AI, and platform product marketing team. And so being able to define this next generation of search AI and being able to help customers actually derive value of generative AI and LLMs is what I'm super excited about. The people I met through my process were very inspiring, and that's what led me to take up this job.
But we all ask a lot of questions. We search for answers. In order to get the best answers, we need to have some context. That's exactly what Elastic is very good at. And then also pair that with observability and security. So that's why a lot of companies are using Elastic.
That's right. I think Elastic started as a search engine, which is very good at taking data which is unstructured, formatting it in a vector format, and it didn't matter actually what format you brought, and formatting it and being able to run these extremely fast search responses for you. And now it found immediate application, both the observability and the security space, because you were able to look at this data and make sense of it. And of course, core search as well is a big use case for a lot of, as I said, the industries we work in and we interact with the day in and day out, whether it's shopping online, whether it is looking for flight tickets, whether it's booking a ride, whether it's, as I said, dating apps, we're all looking at searching. And I think this is where I was blown actually in terms of the number of applications and how we interact with it on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, that's what is super exciting about this new space, especially married with Gen AI.
Yeah, absolutely. As a product marketer, you have to love the product in order to do your job better, right? I want to zoom out a little bit and look back at your career. You worked in VMware, you worked in AWS. Can you think about one of your early project, could be a product launch or something else, it has a big impact you carried into your marketing philosophy today?
Yeah. I didn't grow up as a product marketer. I was a quota carrying sales rep. My very first job out of undergrad. And then did a couple of roles before I actually fell into product marketing in a way and then fell in love with it. And then ever since I've hung my hat there. And so I almost learned on the job as I learned outside of it, where I was trying to sort of grok the principles of product marketing as a discipline. And one of the first projects in a way that I did was at VMware, we merged with Bitnami or acquired Bitnami. And for those who are not aware, Bitnami is basically a repository of open source tools that are hardened for utilization in enterprises. And what we are trying to do is create a marketplace of sorts where customers and partners could interact, because we knew we didn't serve everything that's required in a software supply chain. We needed partners who would fill the gaps. And so it was important to create a platform where both the customers and our ecosystem partners could engage effectively. So, given you asked me what is my early product marketing experience and how I carry this today, the first lesson I learned was because this was complex in a way, right? Because one, we had to make this attractive enough for our partners, and two, we had to make this attractive enough for our customers. And one of the first lessons I learned is our messaging had to be very different. And that's a piece that I carry with me till today, right? If you ask me what is product marketing in a nutshell, or what is product marketing in a nutshell, it's four columns in my head, right? It's basically what's the message, who is it for, how are we saying it, what's our channel, what's our media, and when are we saying it. And for me, it's very important for me to tune the message to the audience we're speaking to. For example, when we spoke to the folks who are going to put their software on this marketplace, it was about the reach and enabling customers to use software more effectively. Whereas to the customer, it was about being able to find the softwares they needed very easily and consume them in an effective manner. So the messaging had to be, though the core essence of the product was the same, it had to be altered, I would say in some cases rather significantly, to reach the audience that you wanted to talk to. So in my framework, the column one and the column two are absolutely important in a forum like this, because you need to understand who you're speaking with. And this applies to products that you and I have also worked on, Gwen. We always speak about, hey, who are the people in the supply chain who are going to engage in this purchasing decision and this buying decision, right? And how do we tune the message? What appeals to perhaps the VP of software engineering may be slightly different or different from what appeals to the platform engineering team, to what appeals to the software developers actually engaging with your software day in and day out. Being able to tune your message to the audience is a big lesson that I learned, and I continue taking it forward today. I always say, who are the three main personas I need to engage with and what matters to them? And how do we solve that problem with the solution we have?
Exactly. You have to understand your audience, and everything has to start with your audience and then end with your audience. I think in your early career, you mentioned you started as a seller, that you have to understand your audience, right? And that must be beneficial to you as a marketer as well. That's why you always think deep when you were writing copy, when you were thinking about a strategy in order to resonate with your
Yeah,
audience.
100%. Sort of having the customer in mind and having the different types of customers you will encounter when you are trying to make a final sale. And we
Exactly.
sometimes think we have ICPs, but those may not again be the right framework for a lot of us, because then sometimes it becomes too complex, because I've seen providers where you have 20 ICPs and like it's very hard to write 20 different messaging types. But what is the ideal number? It depends. That was a big lesson for me. And you're right, understanding your audience is so important.
There are a lot of nuances, right? It can be 20, it can be 10, can be 30, but then there has to be an overarching tagline, right? All of them are nuances.
Exactly.
In itself, product marketing sits in an intersection of product, marketing, sales, and sometimes partners as well. So, in your opinion, what should product marketing own? And then is there a metric or a couple of metrics product marketing should be tracking consistently in order to measure their success?
Great question. And you're right, it depends. There are so many opinions, right? And it is sometimes harder given where product marketing sits. Like you said, it's at the confluence of many different functions. And it's not, oh, you ship a product or you commit so much code, which is very clearly measurable. So, in terms of what product marketing can own, number one, and perhaps this is probably very obvious to folks like you and me who sit within product marketing or have lived in product marketing, but not obvious to the rest of the world, is You need to own the story of the product, and that means the messaging. What does your product do and for whom? Just like how we were talking. And then, and it's important because it's important for product marketing to own because you're not product management or engineering. So you're slightly abstracted. At the same time, you're not sales where you're only looking at how I can make the next sale. So your view is a little more longer term. And so it helps set this broad vision for the company, for the product. I would say number two is 100% the positioning. And this is again jointly with product and sales. I'm not saying this only lies solely with product marketing and they have the veto. Obviously, it's important to bring the stakeholders along, but understanding how your product solves a problem in the market in a different way compared to other choices that customers have. And positioning becomes so important. And we often think positioning is easily definable because it's an extension of messaging, but it's not. What unique space do you occupy in this whole architecture? And why is it unique is so hard for us sometimes to communicate, even though it's there in the product. It's important to speak in a language that's understandable by the audiences you're trying to talk to. Now, the product marketing can be a great influence, if not an owner of pricing and packaging. That is where the value proposition of your product is communicated. And I've seen it both ways where sometimes product marketing is completely abstracted from it. And I've seen where product marketing completely owns it. I like the latter model only because I think your value proposition is so tied to the pricing. And it could even be a differentiator. That's something that product marketing should look at owning or should own. Closely aligned with that is sales enablement. Now, in many companies, product marketing may not own it. You might have a specialist sales enablement team. But in order to help sellers talk about the product, it is important for them to have experts, subject matter experts, who are not very entrenched in the product, but can have a little bit of a abstracted view such that it resonates with customers. Enabling sellers to tell the story effectively and be able to hit at the points that matters to customers. I think that is very critical. At the end of the day, product marketing is a job of storytelling. All of us buy into stories when we're buying anything, whether it's a coffee mug to a sophisticated software. And helping our sellers do that storytelling well is very important. But I think these are the four critical pieces. Of course, there are areas like competitive intelligence, which product marketing should, in many cases, have the right to own given where they sit. There are pieces around, of course, AR and other elements, which, again, I'm getting tactical here, but I would say these would be the four primary functions that I see falling squarely within product marketing, whether it's owned independently, owned jointly with other teams. There's a question based on the enterprise, but I would say these are the main functions that fall well within the product marketing skill set.
You think product marketing should own three main areas. Number one is product messaging and positioning. Number two is the sales enablement. And then number two is pricing and packaging. Number three is sales enablement. And then in addition to that, some of the organizations, product marketing owns AR, which stands for analyst relations, and PR, public relations. And then some of them also own maybe competitive intelligence as well.
Good summary.
I want to switch gears and zoom in a little bit more on your developer expertise at AWS and your current company. Some of the products are very technical and developer focused. So what is your secret sauce? I know some of them really feel like it's really hard to market to developer audience. How do you go about from a very technical concept to a product narrative to a point that tells a story that resonates with the audience as well as resonate with the sales leaders?
Yeah. I think I read somewhere that we often say developers don't like to be marketed to. And the fact is not that developers don't like to be marketed to. I think developers don't like bad marketing, right? They don't like bad marketing, but all of us want to know what a product does. If marketing is about telling you what a product does and why it matters, everybody's interested in that. So to your question on how do we go from deep technical concepts to value proposition messaging that resonates with developers, I think there are a few things. Number one is we need to understand what level of developers we're talking to. And there's a nuance here. For example, most of us are developers. If we've done some element of coding in our life in the past, we can all be developers technically, right? We can all write code very effectively with some of our generative AI tools. But we need to understand where is our starting point, right? What is the minimum skill set, knowledge we expect the audience we're communicating to have? For example, we often say, does my grandma understand this? And that's not, I think that's where we need to be really clear on what's the starting point. Are we talking to folks who have a generic knowledge of like how algorithms are built? Are we talking about somebody who has deep expertise, for example, in infrastructure, or somebody who has deep expertise in front end development, or somebody who has deep expertise in back end? In my case, are we looking at folks who work with data and search algorithms? We need to be clear on what the lowest common denominator is, as I always say, because that establishes on an average. I'm not saying all your messaging is going to be starting there, but at least it gives you a starting point on where the majority of messaging will sit, right? In the bell curve. What does 80% of messaging sit? So that's very important, because then you don't have to make the arc from 0 to 1 or 200 or 300. You're starting to make the arc from 100 to 300 or 400, right? So your starting point is established. Number two, and I think this is where I feel it's always undervalued, is simplicity is undervalued a lot, right? We often think we need to speak in this very complicated language for people to think, hey, this person's smart. But that's not true, because there's already different personas of developers. Not everybody's deeply entrenched in your tech. They all want to understand, what does this technology do and why should I care? And sometimes that's just simple language, right? Either it helps you save a ton of time because it helps you do X, Y, Z things faster. It's got more API bindings than other products. Hey, it helps you save these many lines of code that you would have had to write. It's simple. At the end of the day, the message could be faster, simpler, better. But you need to, one, communicate that and explain how developers are getting there. So basically it's what and how. I think these two things are very important and they should be in simple language. When I spoke to you about this ecosystem of all these different personas and pieces and the lowest common denominator, it is important to also not confuse. Be singular and be specific on, yes, your platform may do 100 different things and may drive like 300 different benefits. But what do you want to stick? Like what matters most? I think it's very, and sometimes you would find that even not just in large companies, even in small companies, there's no alignment of exactly why should somebody care about your product, right? As an advisor to many small companies, and there is even in companies of tens to hundreds of people, sometimes there's no alignment on why somebody should care. But I think it's very important for us to get to that, because only then can you continue investing on those lines from a product perspective and speaking about it externally such that it sticks. So I would say those are my three frameworks on how to get from deep technical concepts to narratives and language that your core audience, in this case developers, understand.
Want to make a quick comment on simplicity, the point you made previously. So I heard somebody said, I don't remember who, if you cannot communicate in a simple way, that means you don't understand it.
You don't understand it. That's why you're not able to explain it in a manner which is simple. Again, we then extrapolate. How can my grandma understand? That's not the point. Can people who have decent knowledge about software understand your product? So we try to oversimplify it. Okay, can my 5-year-old understand it? And sometimes maybe we need to do those exercises, actually. I shouldn't undervalue that. Maybe we should do those exercises to really, truly test whether our messaging is ringing.
Yeah, absolutely. Ramya, can you share what are the inputs? I know the outputs you mentioned, the key area product market showed on is messaging and positioning, right? And then think about your output is messaging framework, product narrative, right? And what about your inputs? What are the information you are taking, and walk us through your process of taking all of the inputs and then produce this amazing and easy to be understood and maybe audience targeted product narrative?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I know as product marketers, we all have different processes. For me, number one is I look at product, either what we call the PRD in the old sense, or PRFAQ in the Amazon world. And in fact, sometimes helping structure it and helping write it, right? What exactly are we delivering to customers, and what are the product features that would help deliver those results? I think that's very important, and that's engaging with product managers really, if that's their vision, and engaging with engineers as well in terms of whether what they're building is truly going to help meet those goals that we've set forth in the product vision. Number three is engaging with customers, and the proxy could be sellers, right? But really trying to understand if early on we have this concept, we have this idea, do you think it's valuable? Do you think it's solving the biggest problems for you? And so that forms a big input, because often we think we are solving XYZ with the same solution, but the customers see the benefit as ABC and not XYZ. And it's happened to me a couple of times where I think, okay, the biggest thing here is speed, right? Customers are able to deliver things very quickly, and they say, no, it's actually the resilience that I'm able to drive. And that comes out as a big factor more than the speed, which we've been touting as the biggest selling point for a specific product. So it's important to, I think, especially having worked in very customer obsessed environments, it has become second nature for at least me to go test early concepts, early ideas, and have a set of customers who are advisors more than just customers who can direct you in the right direction. And sometimes you're right. You could have situations where customers themselves cannot predict the future, but it's still okay to test when they certain things they're hearing about your product. Sales is also very important input sort of provider for us. We look at if, especially for an established company, what has happened in the past? Where have we won? Where have we lost? Those inputs are very critical because I think they help us formulate not just the product, but the messages we want to tell. And again, like you asked me about functions of product marketing, one of the things that I forgot to mention, and I think is critical, is being a big stakeholder into what is being built next, being able to influence product roadmap. For me, as a product marketer, I appreciate that function a lot. And that I think is important, not just for the product building, for the messaging as well. And last but not least, it's looking at your ecosystem and competitor. Who are the other peers offering similar solutions and who are going to help enhance the solution? I think those inputs help form the collective narrative on what the value proposition is. And I think that's very critical when it comes to the inputs that help drive, whether it's the messaging framework, the narrative, how to sell deck, and so on.
You have to take a lot of inputs, product PRFAQ, customer opinions, sales language, and then external ecosystem, including your competitive landscape as well as your partner ecosystem, and then many others. So I want to ask, if the organization is small, maybe that's quite manageable. But when your organization becomes bigger and bigger, when you scale to bigger teams, how do you make sure you don't have any blind spots? Usually we say, okay, there are a lot of inputs. Maybe we anchor on one important one and then keep iterating. Let's say most important one could be customer insights, right? We put a lot of efforts on listening to customer insights and then prioritize customer insights while we are updating the product messaging framework. What is your approach? What is your advice to keep your messaging framework grounded in customer insights, customer truths as your organization scales?
You'll always have blind spots, Gwen, and it's very hard to miss them. I think it is important to keep your ears and eyes open for everything that you can. You asked a great question, right? When you scale, you have so many different types of customers, so many different stakeholders. You have such a variety of inputs coming in, so that sometimes it is almost distracting because you don't know what to focus on. And this is where the simplicity piece that I spoke about becomes so important. What are the key things we want to focus on? Because in messaging, you cannot be everything for everybody. Even as a product marketer, it's very hard to satisfy all factions and functions that you're dealing with. But it is important to prioritize what you think is important. And that input is coming definitely from customers, right? I think if I have to stack rank the inputs that I get, number one would be customers. Even within that, what am I hearing more commonly? And what are the, how can I distill this to 4 or 5 things that are key for us to continue driving in our messaging, in our product, in order to win the market and delight our customers? Because otherwise, it's going to be a quest where you are never going to be able to use all the inputs you get in order to drive to an effective message which is simple, which is sustainable, and which is accurate to your product.
Can you share what are the practical ways to track customer voices in order to make sure your messaging framework is
Yeah.
relevant?
It is depending on the size of the company, you may have too many inputs or too few inputs, right? It just depends. And also, it's also key critical investment of time by customers as well. And sometimes we think, oh, let's just go interview 20 customers. It is very hard, right? Given everybody is dealing with 1,000 things and it's hard to get the right stakeholders using a product and getting to the number, which seems like a good sample size. I've seen this as best practice and it may be applicable or not in different scenarios. Number one, I've seen that every person in the software building cycle can be involved with the customer. Right. For example, engineering and product management teams. Sometimes we only rely on the sales team's input. That can only scale so far. So if product managers, product marketeers, and engineers also make speaking to customers a part of their job, whether it's an idea they're thinking of, or if a customer has run into an issue, get into that issue and try and solve it, I think that provides a lot of insights which we undervalue. And this may not be like 1,000 customers. It can be like, even if you're speaking to 1 to 2 every 2 weeks, I think that's still valuable because you learn a lot. Number two is sales. I always say I learn from my wins, but I learn more from my losses. Inputs on why we lost a specific segment or a customer or an order, I think provides you so many insights that perhaps a win doesn't. And that's a good way to keep track of it. Number three is I've seen companies do this to different extents, but the companies I've worked with did it really well. Even Elastic does it really well. We sort of nurture a community of super users. These users who are who are experts on and big on the technology that we are providing, but it still is a very valuable input of user groups. And I've seen that the more we invest in those user groups, they invest in us in terms of time. So when we invest, and by invest, I say are sharing technology ideas, vision, and sometimes our roadmap to get inputs from them. They become invested in seeing this product through. They want the product to succeed. And nurturing these communities is not easy. You need to find folks who are invested in the technology, and it takes a lot of time and effort. But once you build a decent community, they provide great inputs when you have ideas. They're a small set because they are super users. And sometimes you cannot normalize what you hear there to the rest of the world you're selling to. But it's very insightful in terms of what they're trying to, at least the product you're trying to build. So I would say those are the three mechanisms. I've seen user surveys and the companies I've worked with have been disciplined about doing that every quarter, every half. Those are more mass and definitely one piece of input. But again, nothing is perfect. I think it's a combination of these inputs that help understand customer sentiment and helps us stay close to customer.
Mhm. So both qualitative and quantitative analysis, especially for the qualitative part, right? You need to listen to customers, you need to pay attention to the losses, you need to keep engaged your super users as well. One of the things I want to share as you were speaking about the importance of speaking directly to customers. When I was a journalist, there was a phrase called secondhand information. If you listen to a piece of information from another person, that means it is secondhand information. You always want to optimize for first-hand information. Go to the truth of the information in order to see the full picture.
That makes so much sense, right? Because we all play a game of telephone, right? Where we hear something and then that's translated. So yeah, I concur. I didn't know that was a journalism principle. So I learned something new.
Some of them are transferable across different industries. You always want to seek the truth. You always want to go to the source of
Yeah.
the truth. It applies to journalism, also applies to marketing. So one other question I ask all of the guests is about marketing and sales alignment. I know product marketing traditionally are very close to product teams because you see yourself as a storyteller. You're the first in line to understand what's happening on the product engineering side. Then you work closely with an army of experts behind you, a marketing team and sales team to work together to take the product to market. But then There's a reason for marketing and sales to sit on different teams, right? They have different goals, they're measured differently. And the reality is that it's really difficult to keep the two teams aligned. So, in your past experiences, what is the best alignment look like?
Yeah, like every great answer, it depends. But I was in sales as I was a quota carrying rep. And it is true that sometimes I would be like, our marketing is bad. Our marketing sucks, right? Now on the other side, I can have empathy for both sides. I've seen, and here the depends answer stands because it depends on the stage of the product, the stage of the company. When you speak about early stage companies, everything is in sync. All of us are worried about one thing, the next logo, the next dollar, the next sort of customer case study that we can all showcase to go get others and have that multiply effect. So it's more closely aligned with early stage companies than with really large companies. With really large companies, there are two views. Product marketing is more closely mapped to product management because it's about putting the next story of your product out and looking at the longer term vision, which is more than a quarter. Whereas sales is judged every quarter they have to hit a goal. So sometimes that timeline presents a source of friction because I'm not looking at closing the next quarter. I'm looking at how we can change the story for the company over the next 6 months to a year to 2 years, sometimes 3 years. And that some ideas take time, even if they're technology ideas and technology is moving so fast, it takes time for it to catch speed. And that doesn't mean we stop talking about it. In fact, we continue talking about it and educating our customers where they become comfortable enough and it catches steam. So a few ways in which I've seen things aligned. Not everything can be aligned, but certain things can be. For example, if you have an early stage product in a big company where this becomes a real problem, customer acquisition is a good metric that both marketing as a whole and sales can share. Now, of course, that is where we rely on our friends in demand gen and in field marketing and so on. But PMM can also effectuate that by talking about, okay, what's the use case that we haven't looked at? What's the segment we haven't looked at? Do we have the story for somebody who is slightly different as a buyer, giving sales and the rest of the organization some incentives to chase after? I think that's one of the ways I've seen alignment. I've also, so early, I would say getting new customer acquisition as a target sometimes could be a good shared incentive. And sometimes sales also has long-term incentives. Of course, we look at 1 year goals. If we sow the seeds today, let's say in untapped segments or untapped territories, let's say a new vertical or even a new geographical region, can we then look at a mass collection of whether it's logos, whether it's revenue in a given period of time? That's 1 year to 2 years. But I've typically seen that short-term goals don't work well for PMM plus sales. It's only the long-term goals, but new logos work.
That's very interesting. So, what you're saying is, in order to seek alignment between marketing and sales, maybe start thinking about customer acquisition, especially from the lenses of use cases, new logo, and geo
And
expansion.
you would, because you know that you're going to tap out in your current space. And I think those are incentives.
Yeah, very important. So I want to switch gears and focus more on Elastic as well as AI. So right now you are VP of Product Marketing for Search and AI at Elastic. How do you think about AI is shaping how product marketing work in the future?
I think you're speaking about how Elastic has evolved and how AI can enhance what Elastic already provides. And then I think the second piece is how do I, as product marketing, use AI? So let me break that.
Right.
So I think I spoke to you a little bit about this. What excited me the most is this confluence of generative AI and data that's totally specific to your company. Traditionally, Elastic is excellent at being able to take a bunch of data, whether it's in the form of emails, chats, documents, logs, tickets in your system, in your typical enterprise, and be able to make sense of that and be able to store it, be able to analyze it, and be able to retrieve insights from it. What we call semantic search, not just give me the top 20 pages with this word, but what does this actually mean? And so I think this is where Elastic was really good at. Now, on top of that, you add LLMs, which are reasoning engines. Let's say Gwen wants to go on a holiday. You can ask, help me plan my trip to France with my family, your 2 kids, and over a period of 5 days, you give it information, right? And it gives you a plan. Now, let's say it has information on, okay, Gwen enjoys good food, Gwen enjoys scenic locations, and Gwen does not like long drives. That's your specific context. Imagine if we added to this prompt, but without you having to write it. Basically, it's got this knowledge about you. So it's going to give you very relevant information. That's the practical applicability of Elastic, a combination of this very powerful data store analytics engine, which is uh, which drives excellent context for you and relevance, and then marries it with this worldwide information that you have on what are the things I can do in France, and gives you the response that is so accurate for you. And that's the piece that I'm most excited about, especially when I marry it with generative AI. We recently launched something called Agent Builder, where you basically can build an agent to chat with your own data. And that's, I think, and that can be married with all the MCP interfaces. It can be married with everything that you have externally as well to drive absolutely relevant context. Now, the second part of your question on how am I using AI as a product marketer, I would say it's varying degrees for varying things, right? I know some companies have restrictions in terms of what you can use and what you cannot use, but I use AI a lot to learn. It's basically my second teacher. Remember, I spoke to you about explaining to my grandma and 5-year-old? Sometimes I'm like, I didn't know much about search, but I've been learning a lot about embeddings and indexing and the technology that goes behind building great sort of search platform and a vector database and so on. Use it a lot to learn. I wouldn't say I completely rely on it for all my copy, but I do sometimes have my basic ideas and say, okay, generate a copy, and then I would take that as a first step and then enhance it. It's almost like both ways. Either I would put something in and say, make this better. And sometimes the better may not be absolutely better for me for the context, but the more context I give it, it gets better. Sometimes I use it as the first pass and then I enhance it. So I've used it both ways. I know that I use it in my document searching, arrangement, and so on. That's been excellent. We don't have to write a slide from scratch at all. There are such great tools that help us create slides. And it's something that I've been using quite a bit. I know my team has also been using AI for creating content. If I have a narrative and I need to make this more visual, whether that's in the form of like slides or whether that's in the form of just having like a video, it's been very helpful in that. So I think that's how I've been using it. Some people are way better than I am and their whole life is automated. And some folks won't touch this with a barge pole because it's not as good as I need it to be. I think I'm somewhere in the middle where I found my set of productivity elements with the generative AI and these tools.
Yeah. We're more productive with AI.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So, Ramya, you've built smaller teams and bigger teams. If you were to do it again and start a team from scratch, what would your first three hires be like? What skills do they have to
Yeah.
have?
Oh, I love that question. I think my number one is the capacity to learn. When you and I were talking, we are some people with very different backgrounds, right? Some of us studied computer science. You went to journalism school, but you've been a successful technical product marketer, right? I have done different things, but what sort of binds us all is this curiosity. And we want to learn and we do whatever it takes to learn this technology or learn this new tool. And so for me, that's very important. Number two, somebody who's able to drive ownership. Like somebody who says, okay, I will do whatever it takes to drive success. You and I spoke about it. If it's like, we need to go hit this number in terms of new logos or new business, whether you are putting content out there, whether you're trying to channel your developer community, whether you have to go run some social media campaigns, whether it is going and figuring out what's not working with sales, you do whatever it takes. I appreciate people like that a lot. And number three is somebody who's able to drive to results. It's great if you can do number one and number two, learn and do two pieces, but very quickly understand that this is what is going to give results. This is where I need to perhaps do things differently. And having that knack to then change tactics to drive results and show results to stakeholders as well as to the business is very important to me. Who's had a record of doing it? It's very hard to gauge whether they'll be successful in this scenario, but a good indicator is how they've shown success in the past. I would say being able to learn quickly, who have tremendous ownership, and who are able to show results and success.
So somebody who is curious, somebody who has strong ownership, somebody who is very result
Correct.
driven.
And then I think one last thing which I want to add, you said three, but I'm going to add a fourth, is who has very high rigor. And as we used to call it, bias for action, right? We're in an industry which is changing every day, every minute sometimes. And it's hard to keep pace if we operate in a different clock in a way. And so for me, somebody who has, if you have a project, take it, start running with it and do it before you think you're completely ready. I think is very important, because if we all wait to be ready, the industry has changed. Very important skill for me.
I do want to ask one question about the developer focused and especially the product, closer to the product side. In your mind, what are the pros and cons for putting product marketing within marketing org versus within product org?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. And I've worked in both scenarios. You can bridge the organizational gap, but it takes time depending on where you are. Your outputs and your outcomes should matter if you have an effective organization, an effective product marketing organization. If you're working in the traditional sort of CMO organization as a product marketer, you have access to your partners in field marketing and branding. The channels become more easily accessible because this is the team that owns channels. But it is easier to get a little abstracted from the product. And that's not what you want. So you'll have to work extra hard to sort of envisage that relationship and make sure you're counted as a member of the product team so that you know what's coming and you're able to effectively change in the roadmap and tell the story. On the other hand, if you're in the product team, you get abstracted a little bit from the channels and the events and the field. It shouldn't matter. We're all part of the same team, but sometimes you need to focus on where your relationship should be and where you need to invest more of your time and energies. The overarching thing, how you get people to work, whether you sit here or there, is having shared incentives and shared goals. It need not be shared KPIs, but it should be what matters to you. What are the big things you're trying to accomplish as a product manager or a field marketer over next year? And what do I have in my toolkit that can help you achieve your goals? I think that conversation is very important. And you cannot do everything. Like you as a field marketer may have so many regional specific goals and maybe you have so many account based goals. I may not be able to carry those, but if I know your vehicles to get there and I can help you with them, we'll still hit some resonance somewhere. So I don't know if that answers your question, but basically it depends. It shouldn't matter in the long run, but in order for it not matter, you need to find points of commonality and work hard on them.
Yeah, I like that. So always look at your goals and treat that as a North Star to seek alignment and look at your existing vehicles to achieve your
Exactly.
goals.
Because we don't have everything. We can't do everything. How many times have you been told, go run this campaign? They're like, actually, I can't. I don't have the money. Or the channels are not open to explain what you're trying to track and what matches with what they're trying to track.
At Amazon, we used to talk about leadership principle. I'm sure at Elastic will have similar ones. So across your career, Ramya, so what is the hardest leadership principle or philosophy you feel like you have to uphold, especially even in a very intense work environment?
Yeah, I remember I spoke to you about ownership and being able to let people do whatever it takes. I think a corollary to that is when you are working in a fast-paced environment and you're building a team and you have stakeholders. Sometimes especially when things are going so fast, you want to be an enabler, but you don't want to go do the work or go do others. Be a blocker or be a roadblock or cause hindrance because you want to move things quickly. So for example, let's say you have a big launch coming up. Each of us is responsible for different things. Sometimes to move quickly, you will be tempted, and I know I'm tempted, to go and help move it. But that's really not my expertise, right? That's really not my strength. And still being able to encourage them and egg them on, but being a part of the team, but not doing the actual work, I think is a very hard sort of leadership principle. Your ownership can go both ways. Your ownership is, yeah, do whatever it takes, but you also want people who are the experts to do the job because you're not going to do as good a job. And so that becomes hard sometimes. Ownership is a fantastic leadership principle, but it shouldn't drive to lower quality of results. It's very hard to uphold, especially when you're driving really fast, but you should do it in a way of being a catalyzing factor for your sister teams or your core teams versus trying to do it all because you're not going to scale, you're going to fail.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you are working with people. You have your principle to uphold, but then there are different approaches of doing
Yes,
things.
there are different skill sets, and we should admit what we're good at and what we're not.
I want to ask you about your personal leadership principle, your way of leading, right? When you are scaling large product portfolios, have you ever had any self-doubt or any ambiguity, and how do you deal with it?
I would be lying if I said I don't face that every day. I think a part of growing up and part of like growing is pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, whether it's a new product, new project, new company, new experiments, new tactics. It's important to do because that's the only way you grow. You have to stretch yourself. Every time I start something like that, I'm always doubtful. Am I going to do this? Am I going to fail? Am I going to conquer the ultimate North Star goal? These doubts still exist because at the end of it, we're all humans and we all know that we've not done this in the past, right? And so that's always there in the back of your head. The way I deal with this, when I always say you can't move a ship with a swing, right? It's not like you can just turn the wheel and then it turns, right? You've got to slowly maneuver and change direction. So in my head, the way you make these big changes is by starting with small steps. And so whenever you think of this big goal, it's very scary, it's very audacious, and it's very overwhelming. But if you break it down into short, okay, what's the next thing I need to do? What do I need to do tomorrow? What do I need to do day after? Sometimes having that long-term vision and that short-term perspective helps because then you're not overwhelmed or bogged down by this big thing. You're just chipping away on what to do next. And I mean quickly, but you're chipping away on the next thing. Instead of getting those small wins is very important. And then you're heading that direction where you want to go. But I don't know if that makes sense. That's how I deal with it personally, where I think of small achievable goals and go from there.
I think that's very smart. In order to make it less intimidating, maybe you can break it down to smaller actions. And I feel personally very helpful too. Like the more I do something, the less anxious I am because I know I'm heading towards my bigger goal.
I think the biggest step is starting and then getting.
Yeah.
That's why I say you will, if you wait till you're ready to start, you're never going to start, right? Yeah.
I was about to ask your last question, which is the best career advice you've received so far. Is that the one, or you have another one?
I do have another one because this is more lived experience, and I've seen many people say it, including but it's never take advice from someone who's not where you want to be. What that means is you need to take advice from people who are probably living the life you want or have lived the experience you want. Let me put it that way. I come from an Indian family, you come from an Asian family, parents are very influential, right? This is what you need to do. This is what you need to study. This is how you need to craft your goal. And very early on, I think I had somebody tell me that stop taking advice from your parents. And it's not because they don't mean good, they have only the best interest in their head. It's because they just don't know. They just don't know. They've never done what you're trying to do in the field you want to work in or in the country you want to work in. My parents were in India. I can't ask them about working in corporate America, dealing with a global audience. They just don't know. I'm sure they'll have advice if I go ask them, but it wasn't the right thing. For example, I've changed careers a bit and was in management consulting. After a point, ex bosses and peers became great friends and advisors to a certain extent. They really cannot tell me about product marketing in the technology world. If I need advice, I need to go to somebody in the space, right? Many people have been very blunt about it. Don't ask me. I've never lived that life. I've not marketed on the West Coast or to developers. So don't ask me. Go ask somebody who's done it. So I think that's the best piece of advice because often when you go to people for advice, they will give you the advice, but they don't have the expertise. Said otherwise, only ask the experts and experts in your field for the advice because otherwise you're going to get a whole bunch of things because people will think it's their right to give you advice, but those pieces of advice would not be beneficial. So, yeah, do not take advice from someone who's not where you want to be.
It's awesome. Thank you so much, Ramya. This is amazing. And thank you for sharing a lot of insights on your leadership on Elastic as well as on product marketing. I really enjoyed our time here. And thanks to my audience for listening to this episode. I have a lot of upcoming interesting conversations. So we'll see you next time.